What's going on, Geminites? It's your boy Gem Min, aka Gemesis. I'm back with another recent reads video. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and that's because I've been reading Avengers X-Men Onslaught. Not only is this a thick-ass book, but it's extreme 90s X-Men, which I've always found kind of very hard to follow. But yeah, we'll talk about X-Men Avengers Onslaught. It's the first time that I read the run, even though this was around the time that I got into comics as a kid. It follows Fatal Attraction storyline and Age of Apocalypse. So there's going to be spoilers for that, and also spoilers for Onslaught. So if you haven't read this stuff and you wanted to get into it without being spoiled, might as well leave and then come back once you've read it, because I don't want to have to try to censor myself. So here goes the omnibus. Here goes the back. We'll end up flipping the camera around to look at the artwork. But what's cool is that the front of the dust jacket, this poster, it's the same poster that's wrapped around the entire book, which looks really, really awesome. So there's a lot of good artwork in here. Like you can see on the cover, very, like I said, extreme 90s. It's funny because some of the covers, like the issues, have like this early 3D artwork for like the X-Men logo and stuff. But the Onslaught series goes across a number of X titles and Avengers titles. So it goes across Cable, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, X-Man, X-Men, X-Men Unlimited. Then Onslaught has its own kind of stuff. There's a Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, X-Factor, Amazing Spider-Man, a Green Goblin, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Punisher, and Thor issues, besides little epilogues and stuff that were created just for this run. When Onslaught first comes around, it's a big mystery as to who he is. He's this big hulking beast of a villain. He lurks in the shadows for a lot of issues in the beginning, and you don't know who he is. Then we find out who he is, and he's actually everything that's evil within Magneto and within Professor X. But essentially, it's Professor X. So what happens is when Magneto rips the adamantium out of Wolverine in X-Men Fatal Attractions, Professor X decides to use his mutant ability to wipe Magneto's mind. So in doing so, they kind of show us that some evil that was lurking within inside Magneto was kind of freed and put into Professor X when that happened. And I forgot to mention, so when Magneto rips out that adamantium, Wolverine starts becoming more and more feral, right? He's got his bone claws. He starts wearing his bandana instead of a mask. He's looking like a beast. And anyway, so Professor X basically wipes his mind, and that evil within Magneto goes into Professor X. Professor X is not really acting like himself for a few months, you know, with all initial onslaught sightings, and then we eventually find out who he is. Now, when he first shows up on the scene, and you can see how he looks, right? He looks like a big version of Magneto, like Super Shredder for Magneto, but it's actually Professor X manifested into this being who's a very powerful powered mutant. Magneto ends up getting de-aged about 10 years and has no recollection of him as Magneto. He calls himself Joseph, and he actually gets very chummy with Rogue, which I found kind of interesting because in Age of Apocalypse, an alternate future timeline, Magneto and Rogue are married. So it's kind of funny that they hit it off in this timeline with Magneto as Joseph. There's a couple other characters from that alternate timeline. You have Dark Beast, who's been posing as regular Beast and keeping the real Hank McCoy, keeping him prisoner, and he's kind of isolated in some underground lair or some shit like that. You have X-Man, who is also Nathan Summers, and you have Cable. Cable as a baby was injected with, what's this shit called? Some kind of cyber infection by Apocalypse, and then he grew up with that. Nate Summers never had that happen to him, or X-Man never had that happen to him, so he's all crazy powerful as well, and doesn't have that techno virus, or whatever the hell you call it. And then, of course, you have Bishop, who's there as well. Before we start looking into the art and getting more into the story, basically you have this character that was created out of these two powerful mutants, Professor X and Magneto, becomes Onslaught. It seems like he initially wants to fulfill Magneto's prophecy or Magneto's goal of ridding the world of humans, but then he just decides he needs to rid the world of humans and mutants altogether. So Professor X is trapped inside of Onslaught for a majority of the time, and then he ends up becoming free, and Onslaught is able to function on his own. Then he goes after Franklin Richards, which is the son of Reed and Sue Richards of the Fantastic Four. Now, I don't really recall what he was exactly trying to accomplish with the kid. I know he's a very strong mutant, and he can bend reality and create reality. I don't remember what the hell he was doing. But that gets basically Fantastic Four involved, and it gets Avengers involved. A lot of those tie-ins with Green Goblin, Spider-Man, which is the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. Green Goblin is actually Ben Urich's nephew or whatever. It's not Ned Leeds. And those kind of tie-ins really just deal with Onslaught. He first unleashes the Sentinels on all of mankind and all the mutants, and they tear up New York City. Very similar to how they do it in The Dark Knight Rises, where New York City's just cut off from everybody. Sentinels are running rampant. And those tie-ins have a lot to do with that. In the main story, X-Men and Avengers and everyone takes these cracks at Onslaught, but they really can't get to him. He's got these psi powers. You just can't really mess with him. They end up using Hulk. Hulk tells Jean Grey to remove Banner from his mind. He just goes full berserker Hulk. He gets pissed. The angrier he gets, the stronger he gets, and he's able to crack Onslaught's armor. And Onslaught basically comes out of his shell, and he's just this big gaseous kind of conscience. And Thor goes to attack him, kind of goes inside the conscience, and it's fucking Thor up. And I guess they figure out if everybody goes inside of this conscience, they can evaporate him from the universe. But it's going to sacrifice all of the people who do that. And it can't be any mutants, because if any mutants go inside of this gaseous cloud or whatever, he'll be able to draw their mutant powers out of them. So essentially what happens is you have all of the Avengers, like the main ones, right? You have Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Hulk. Bruce Banner gets physically separated. So actually Bruce Banner goes inside. Hulk stays behind, and you don't really see what happens to him. I believe Giant Man and Wasp and Black Panther, they all sacrifice themselves along with the Fantastic Four, and they're gone. Now, when I was reading the main story, their deaths weren't really that good. Like, I was like, did they die or what? And it wasn't until the next issue where it's like a world without heroes that I'm like, oh shit, they really did kill them off. So they didn't really execute the deaths very well, especially for such big characters. The whole time through this story, they're really pumping the Heroes Reborn, so it looks like they wanted to reboot anyway. So you can see the front of every issue says, a Heroes Reborn, whatever, in this issue. And then they're also pumping Operation Zero Tolerance, which I haven't read either, so maybe I have to take a look at that next. I got a couple of plans of what I want to read. But anyway, yeah, that's the big thing, is that you get this huge villain, crazy powerful. He ends up being Professor X, so that leads to all these other types of issues. And it takes all the heroes to stop him, and then you're left with just mutant heroes. All the regular heroes get killed. So that's basically the gist of it. Did I like it? I'm glad that I got it under my belt. It did take a long time for me to read it. Some of the text can be very wordy in these 90s X-Men, and there's so many characters, man. I mean, you got Mr. Sinister stuff, you got a bunch of Generation X, X-Factor, X-Force. It's like, holy shit. So there's a lot going on, man. But, and some of the art is not the best. Like this kind of stuff, I don't know if you can see it. We'll flip the camera around. But it's very, like, art that was on your Trapper Keeper kind of stuff. But overall, I like the idea. It's probably something that you don't need to read with all the tie-ins, but it was a good overall storyline. I liked what I read. I'm glad that I read it, got it under my belt. Gonna move on to the next thing, but let's go ahead and flip it around and take a look at some of the artwork. I'm sure it'll jog my memory on some of the key points, like Juggernaut was the first one to find out who Onslaught was, and Jean Grey trusts Juggernaut, and that's like in the beginning and stuff like that. So let's check it out. All right, we got the big boy sitting in the book holder here. Right off top, you can see that artwork. That's some really awesome artwork right there. Onslaught, Wolverine's bone claws, X-Men, got Mr. Fantastic and all that kind of stuff. So there goes your main villain here. That's Onslaught himself. This is what you can really expect from most of the artwork in this book. That type of look. So it's like mid to late 90s stuff. So this is where we start. We start in Cable. The Cable stuff's cool. It's a lot of him battling with himself, with the techno virus that he's got in him, or whatever they call it. I forget. I'm trying to think about what his main plot was. It's not really with him and Domino. I think a lot of the Cable stuff was trying to prevent the Sentinels from being released. Some Uncanny X-Men stuff here. Shatterstar. I don't like that look for Shatterstar. It's not really Madeline Pryor. That's X-Man with Threnody or some chick he's with. Or maybe it was Madeline Pryor. That really only lasts for a couple of issues. Oh, then you got your man Holocaust. So he's another one from Age of Apocalypse. He's here too. Pretty cool cover. So 90s. I can just see the action figure now. So this was the crystal that ended up reversing that Age of Apocalypse. So this is really nothing to even do with Onslaught. X-Men Unlimited, Magneto, and Rogue. So that's when he's really Joseph. Here he is right here. A little bit younger. Still got the long white hair. This is when she just starts to trust him. Gambit does not like that. So there's this huge rift between with Gambit, because Gambit's into Rogue, man, and she's all buddy with this person who was Magneto or whatever. So Gambit ain't feeling that. Here goes Juggernaut. He knows there's some kind of block in his head because he knows who Onslaught is. He runs into him, so he runs to X-Men for help. Jean Grey helps him out. This is when he first goes to the school. There goes Jean. So anyway, this guy Bastion's a pain in the ass. He plays a big role towards the end, and with Operation Zero Tolerance, that's his like government group or whatever the hell. This is what to expect out of this book. Straight up extreme 90s. That's cool stuff, man. So here goes Onslaught messing with Juggernaut. There goes your Feral Wolverine. Bone Claws. Bandana for a mask. So then we get some Avengers stuff finally. Basically, you have to call in the big guns because this threat is so big. The Watcher even comes down to take a look because it's basically the end of an era, and Apocalypse is parlaying with him. Apocalypse is always down for a good fight to see who's going to be the survivor. That's his whole thing, survival of the fittest. This was an awesome fight with Hulk, that he goes through a couple of different Hulk personalities. It's a Cable issue. So let me see real quick. So he's fighting Hulk, and he's the modern Hulk at the time, who's smart and green, right? Basically, they fight, and he becomes Gray Hulk, Mr. Fix-It, and then he goes from Gray Hulk to Savage Hulk, which is fun. He's still gray. His virus is going out of control throughout this series. So then he becomes Savage, which is like a lime neon green, I guess. He goes Apocalypse. You have some Wild Child. So then you have Random. Dark Beast. Posing as Beast. Mystique. That's my favorite version of Sabretooth. So the spider stuff was cool. I think I read those issues back in the day because I was always big on Spider-Man growing up. Then you have your solo Green Goblin issue. Tying in with Onslaught. That's funny. It's a cool little issue. A lot of Sinister and X-Man back and forth. Sinister sees the version of the world that X-Man comes from, and he's in it. He's with it. This is when Sentinels get released on New York, and that's kind of what sets off the whole final battle. Sinister on throne. That would be a nice statue like that, right? This is cool. So this is when Onslaught has Franklin, and you think Franklin's reaching out for Nate, for X-Men to grab him, but it's really Onslaught. It's a trap, and that's how he ends up getting X-Man and Nate for the end of the battle. Hulk stuff. They show a lot of Onslaught trading cards. You know I'm into that, so that was cool to see those at the end of these issues. Some nice art in some of these, right? Some of the art's funny. I guess those X-Men art I wasn't really a big fan of. This was a Punisher issue. I'll show you. Punisher 11. See, they've been doing those tie-ins since back in the day, y'all. This was a Thor issue. The Thor issue was good. This was a Wolverine issue with him just saving a kid out of a burning building, but he's trying to show him getting his humanity back. The FF issue, Fantastic Four. So at this point, Onslaught no longer has Xavier within him. Xavier loses his powers. Here's the wraparound cover. The final battle. So this is when the Avengers decide they have to go into that blue, which is basically Onslaught outside of the armor. Thor goes in there first, and when he goes in there, they can hear that he's not doing so well. He can't handle that alone. So that's when they realize the more heroes that jump up in there, the weaker Onslaught will get. And they all have to sacrifice themselves in order to save him. But see, that was the deaths. Like, you couldn't even tell, like, are they dead or what, right? It's like they keep jumping into it. And then once all the heroes are inside of that gaseous cloud, then all the X-Men need to attack from the outside in order to destroy Onslaught. I guess that explosion is supposed to let you know that they all died, but I was like, did they die or nah? You know? So anyway, when we end, Fantastic Four is dead, but Franklin is alive, and he's pretty confident, so you kind of get the idea, like, he knows he's going to find a way to get them back. Charles Xavier turns himself in, and that guy Bastion, you know, he's not turning himself into the people he thought he was. He has no powers, and he's basically in this kind of Department H kind of Weapon X program setup kind of thing. Like, think Deadpool in the movie, the kind of place he was trapped in with your man Bastion. But he does meet a little mutant girl in that prison who tells him, "Oh, you didn't lose your powers; they're just turned off. I could turn them on for you." And he's like, "No, I'm not ready." So you know he knows he can get his powers back. This was an annual that just shows all the X teams after just trying to pick up the pieces. They're outside playing sports. They have a pool party. They have a barbecue. Like it can't get more extreme 90s than this. This Sentinel comes around, but he ends up being good or whatever, and they kill him anyway, and that's a whole big thing. But hold on, where's the pool party? Oh, here it goes. So anyway, it's pretty much how we end. This is Professor X in that facility, prisoner M13. So yeah. So the omnibus, that's the little girl. So the omnibus gives you the road to Onslaught. I guess this was a comic. I didn't read all this. I already went through the whole thing. This is all like the stuff that happened in the X-Men history leading up to this. Yeah, so cool. Advertisements in the back. Alright, y'all, so that was my X-Men Avengers Onslaught Omnibus recent reads. I hope you enjoyed it. Just my point of view, kind of like a little review on the story and what my thoughts were. And if you didn't have any idea about it, bam, gave you the gist of it. Really what I want to read next is some more X-Men stuff, but a little bit more modern. I want to read the Messiah Complex, Messiah War, X-Necrotia, and the X-Force run that follows that. So I think I'm going to dive into that next. Any suggestions or recommendations or anything that you want to see me do a recent reads on, let me know in the comments. And, you know, I'll see what I can do. But that's pretty much it. Today's Sunday. Normally we would do Gem Mint Collectibles Live with Milton the Manimal, but he went out of town like we told y'all last Sunday. So we'll be back next week for that. I have a in-stock trades haul coming in this week, so that'll be fun. We'll do a video. I don't really have any statues coming in. The only thing I'm really expecting soon is the Pop Culture Shock 1/3 scale regular costume Ryu. So maybe that'll ship next week or the week after that. Other than that, we're looking at like April, May, June for like statue stuff. So unless I start getting any old pieces, not really expecting much. But thanks for checking out the video. Make sure to hit that like button on your way out. Drop me a line in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed. One of many segments that we do here at Gem Mint Collectibles. And check me out on Facebook, Gem Mint Collectibles, and follow for pictures and exclusive content and shit like that. So, thank you for joining me. Stay minty. Peace.